He's accurately predicted what would happen. What's coming next? Where are we currently? What's up next with Lyndon LaRouche? Sir, thank you for joining us today.
Good. How do you do?
I'm okay here in grave times, but again, you've accurately predicted. Where are we currently? Where are we going?
We're right on the edge of thermonuclear war. As to whether that will happen or not, that's another question. But the likelihood that it could happen is great. What's happened is the U.S. forces in the eastern Mediterranean and in the Persian Gulf regions, especially naval forces in particular, are positioned for a launching of thermonuclear war. The name of the game, of course, is what we're going to do to Syria or what we're going to do to Iran. But if you look at the forces in the area, that makes no sense. Then you look at other aspects of it, and you know that Russia's in on the thing, defending Syria in particular against this atrocity, and you realize that we're on the edge of actually going to thermonuclear war. What happened was, of course, and I don't know how well this is known, but our leading general officers who are advisors and so forth, who advise us on our security, have opposed any action by Obama of this type. So therefore that is in that degree tied up. But what's hanging out there is at any moment a war could start. Now, this war will be a war with thermonuclear weapons. That's the fact. The idea that this is only Syria and Iran is nonsense. This thing, what we have positioned in the Gulf area and in the eastern Mediterranean, what we have positioned is a capability for thermonuclear war and nothing else. Our allies, including the British, do not have the depth of weapon capability for doing something like this. Only the United States and only the thermonuclear warfare capability of the United States could actually conduct such a war. It would be a war against the entirety of Asia and other places. It's now being halted. The British are pushing this greatly, and we're on the edge of it.
All right, you have amazing sources. We're going to break in a moment. I want to come back and go over this, but for those that don't know, it's not even getting much attention here. It's all over the foreign press. Russia, Medvedev yesterday told Poland and others, go ahead and move your missiles in. We're going to blow them up. We're going to destroy them. And Russia normally doesn't just make threats, just like 888 in 2008 when the West attacked South Ossetia and other areas, and the Russians rolled in mobile nukes. The Russians have said we're going to block your supply routes in the Russian air-controlled route into Afghanistan. The Pakistanis are blocking that route. Russian ships have shown up in Syria, and they've moved 2 months ago U.S. troops out of Iraq into Kuwait. And I've talked to people who are involved. They're telling them get ready for a giant war. So you're right. I mean, obviously you have a lot of sources, but this is incredible.
Well, this is what we're working against right now. The Russian operation is not actually an aggressive operation. But what happened was the following. You remember the war, not Syria, rather in Libya. Now, that was rushed through, and the intention was, and the signals were definitely from Britain, was to go immediately to the war against both
All right, sorry to interrupt you. Let's stop right there. You said Syria because that's next on the list, obviously, the same paradigm. But Libya, then Syria. We'll talk about the geopolitical ramifications. Lyndon LaRouche, straight ahead. Key information. Stay with us. Banks collapsing, rumors of war. It's on. Things are getting wild. Lyndon LaRouche, please continue.
Well, we've got to understand the general situation. First of all, we have a general breakdown of the entire international financial system. It's worse in the transatlantic region. It's less bad in the Asian region. Now, we talk about these bankers. They're bankrupt. We're in now in the worst hyperinflation in world history right now. These bankers don't have anything. If you tried to redeem any of the claims they think they have less than nothing. This is empty blank paper passed it for hyperinflation. This is being highly managed politically by doing all kinds of things to Europe and doing things to the United States. But this thing is not going to survive. These banks, every blasted one of them, is doomed. Now, there is a solution for this, and it's the only solution. It's Roosevelt's solution, Franklin Roosevelt's solution, Glass-Steagall. That does not solve the total problem. That eliminates the worst problem right now and makes it possible to undertake management of the problem. We would also have to create, since the Federal Reserve System no longer functions, it's hopelessly bankrupt. It could never be paid up. This thing will never be paid off. It's doomed. So therefore, we're going back to the old classify this thing as commercial paper that is not backed by anything. It's speculative paper, and therefore just put it out on its own and let the people try to collect the money. There's nothing there. We have to save a part of our financial system, our commercial banking system. That's with Glass-Steagall. But that's not enough money to start a recovery, and we need now an actual physical recovery, because our people are going to start dying massively. You look at the food supply for the United States going into the months ahead. Think about March and April at the present rate. We're going to have people dying of hunger and effects correlated to that in the United States. So therefore, we need an immediate reform. We understand, I do, and I guess some other people as well do. We go through Glass-Steagall. That could save the United States temporarily. It will also be a vehicle to save Western Europe temporarily, because if we do this, they'll do it. But the other thing we have to do is we have to go back, since we don't have a Federal Reserve System anymore. It's bankrupt. It's hopelessly bankrupt. We therefore have to go back to Hamilton's original policy, which was U.S. constitutional policy. We go back to a credit system, not to a banking system, not to a money system. Under a credit system, the federal government can authorize a federal debt for specific purposes. Some of these things will be government projects, totally government projects, like the Tennessee Valley Authority was a project. NWAPA is a project of the same nature, but a much bigger one. You have transportation systems we need, all kinds of things we need, which the federal government is going to have to finance, and it has to be financed on good management. But then there are other things we can do. We can also get into long-term agreements with nations of the world, and we can create a fixed exchange system among nations which agree to the idea of Glass-Steagall for their case.
So stop the global concerted devaluation. But shifting back, sir, the elites, the finance oligarchs and their tropism that you've talked so much about, they're not going to stop. They are preparing Dodger Stadium right now as a giant FEMA camp. Kevin Booth's getting video of it. They're under Homeland Security. They're arresting the occupiers nationwide as a giant simulation of political arrest. As you know, they passed the bill to secretly arrest U.S. citizens and have you just disappear. No one even knows where you go. Literal, the disappearances like the Khmer Rouge or something. I mean, am I right in saying they're going into hyperwarp? And they've made the decision to go ahead and start wars and have a classic police state, and they're going forward. I mean, it's just come out that Henry Paulson, we already knew this, gave hedge funds inside information on Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae when he was Treasury Secretary. Well, of course he did. I mean, these are brazen criminals.
Well, you've got. Look, it's very simple. We can deal with it if the American people have the guts to do so, and the temperament and their direction is strong right now, as you probably know. That if you move this president, Obama, out of office on the basis of his charge that he's insane, that's under the 25th Amendment, Section 4, he qualifies for expulsion from the presidency on the basis of that. Also, at the same time, you've got other things. He's also committed crimes against the Constitution. The Libya war was a crime. It was a violation of the Constitution. He's done many other things. Many of his so-called laws are violations of the Constitution. The attempt to prevent the Congress, the members of the Congress, from appealing what was a fraud against the government in this war in Libya is typical. What people have to have the guts to do. Many people realize that Obama has to be out of office. What they're not realizing is he has to be out of office now. And there are two ways to get him out. One is to impeach him. But the other, the more immediate and more effective one, is the fact that he is clinically insane. And his insanity is of a very specific type, which is explicitly specified in the 25th Amendment, Section 4. All the evidence is there. Lift him out of the presidency, and I can guarantee you that a lot of things will change very quickly.
Sure, and of course he is spoiled milk. I mean, he politically now has a lower approval rating than Richard Nixon at the bottom, and of course Jimmy Carter. But the Corzines and the Robert Rubins and the people behind him, they don't care. They're going ahead with this homicidal looting of the system. So my question is, I agree with your solutions on that front. You're absolutely right. Great ideas, sir. You called for it long before these crises even began. What I'm saying is they don't appear to be stopping. They don't care. It's like Corzine making a 40-to-1 bet on Euro bonds and then stealing his account holders' private money. It's admitted to be illegal. The head of the CFTC's invested with him and just says, we're going to allow it. I mean, they're entering a psycho land. Will they be allowed to just steal and destroy everything is my question. I mean, what does MF Global...
You got one vulnerability. It's come to one point. Right now, a few people with the guts in the world can sink the whole thing immediately, and there are solutions. But the key thing here now, one thing... If you do this one thing, you're going to uncork everything and give a chance to the United States and other nations to survive. That one thing is get this president out of office now. If you don't get him out now, you are probably going to have thermonuclear war, from which very few people will survive. And so it's a choice. We haven't got the guts to throw this bum out of office now when the evidence for it exists. Or are we going to be gutless and get into this kind of hell from which the human species itself might not exist? Do we have the guts to save the world?
Well, how do you get rid of Obama? Because that would cause kind of a breakup of things and allow new ideas to be injected, because clearly he is narcissistic. Clearly he's constantly partying and in la-la land and playing golf 6 hours a day. I mean, you look at him, he does act like he's completely out of his mind.
And he's a British puppet. He's not an American. That election of his was a big fraud. It was the complications of how this was pulled. But mainly it was British money and British drug money, which was the big factor in flooding him into the presidency. Actually, on the basis of counting the votes in one way, on the Democratic side, he lost the Democratic nomination in fact. But because of a special feature, the way the thing was run, he was put in as the nominee for the election, a Democratic nominee. He shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Well, how does getting rid of Obama help? I mean, how does that help?
I can guarantee you personally that getting rid of Obama in this way, in this time, and you'll save the United States. If you don't do this, if you don't get Obama out now in this time, when the legal basis for doing so exists very clearly, then you're not going to save the United States.
I know, but explain to me the chain reaction. What is that vacuum if this puppet of the corrupt elements of Wall Street and finance capital, if he was removed for all the Fast and Furious, the illegal wars, the mafia stuff, the list goes on and on.
Look at it. The American people hate this guy now. They hate him. And they hate him for good reasons. Huh? There's nothing protecting him. If you take out of his hands the powers of the president, at that instant, you're going to get a sudden change in the United States because the people in the United States are ready for it. The problem is many of them don't have the guts to do what they should do.
Okay, what do we do to get Obama out of there? Because then we get a Biden. I mean, let's say Obama, for corruption charges, whatever, went bye-bye, what happens?
No, you have to remove Obama because he's a dictator. You remove the dictator, and you don't have to worry about these other problems so much. The American people, given the choice now, And the choice is take Obama out of the picture.
So you're saying it's that symbolic symbol of the puppet would-be dictator removed will send shockwaves through the structure. There won't be that executive fear factor. It'll be seen as a blow, a vote against the direction we're going, and will automatically steer energy towards other solutions.
It will also cause elements of the government and key parts of the government to take the action that's needed. And they have, with Obama out, not in the White House, not empowered in the White House, those other elements of our federal government, which I know will act in an appropriate way to end this nonsense. That does not mean we're going to have everything solved automatically, but we're going to have the power of the decision to decide what is done, given back to the American people. And that will happen. The anger in this population, in the U.S. population, against what's being done to them, what has been done to them, they are ready to act. They're not mobilized in their mind as to know how to act. We have to put in their hands the means to act. And once they realize we've given them the means to act and made some suggestions of what the measures are that have to be dealt with in order to bring this about, I can guarantee you, if I weren't as old as I am, I'd be running for president on the basis of filling in the absent term of Obama.
And so you could inject real issues. Now, expanding on this, looking at what's currently happening, I know you have amazing sources in government, the military, you name it. That's been admitted by the Washington Post and others. Again, former head of the National Security Council said you had the best private intelligence network out there. And I'm getting through my feelers the same things you're getting, and a lot of it, of course, months later manifests in the mainstream news. So there's major credibility here from my position, your position, our research, our history of giving people factual information. People can debate our analysis of the info, but the info stands on its own. You say you're being told that the military has already said no to launching this new World War III that so many Obama advisors have asked him to launch, so that
the relevant elements into the U.S. command structure. And we're in a situation now where we're dealing with people in other countries as well on this question. We have to get the coordination. We have significant cooperation for doing what is necessary. Number one, no thermonuclear war, which means no repetition of Libya, no war in Syria, no war against Iran. Because all these wars, if they are allowed to occur, will mean thermonuclear war. Once the trigger is set.
Because now you're on China and Russia's border, yes.
No, not just on that. You've got a situation in which the power to declare war, which is now in the hands of the president, and he's not going to listen to anybody else while he's still president. It's
setting a very dangerous precedent, and just like Hitler, or, of course, we have the examples of other people like Napoleon. Once they start down this road, we can clearly see where it's going. So let me ask you this question. You say in the command structure, they're saying no. We knew Fox Fallon did that 4 or 5 years ago. We know there's been other examples. You're saying your military sources are telling you there's already been internal rebellions against launching these new attacks.
There's a special group of people who have the authority to put their voice in and to say whether a war should be launched or not, as long as the chance is there, as long as we're not attacked. And now the point is, if this president is in charge, he is going to pull the strings under British orders. It's going to be British orders, but it's going to be American muscle. We have the greatest concentration of thermonuclear warfare capability stationed in the eastern Mediterranean. It's U.S. largely. It has the other jokers in, and also in the Persian Gulf. We have enough thermonuclear power based there to try to take out Asia. And
you're right. And by the way, it's admitted, especially in the foreign press, the Russians are buzzing around like an anthill that's been disturbed right now on total defense alert. Let's come back and talk about this straight ahead. And Russia's saying, you move the missiles, we know you've moved into Poland, we're going to go ahead and attack. It's just total red alert right now, and it's because the banksters are making their move. They're making their move, and they are completely crazy. It's like Max Kaiser says, they're suicide bankers. Lyndon LaRouche is our guest. Amazing information. Straight ahead. Lyndon LaRouche is our guest. You were getting back to nuclear war. What does it mean to have the Russians on alert, sending their ships into the Mediterranean? And as you said, they've moved all these U.S. cruisers and subs in with nukes. Like you're saying, the military buildup is not for a conventional war. Please continue.
It's not a conventional war. There is no conventional war. The conventional war is not possible. Actually, since the time when I was launching what became known as the SDI, and the SDI principle, even though the circumstances are modified today by time, nonetheless, the same principle is crucial. There can be no major war on this planet that is involving major powers, which does not lead to thermonuclear war. In other words, with Libya, you came up to the edge of it, but it was already the potential back in the 1970s. When I first got on doing this thing on the SDI program, because it was impossible to fight major war with major powers involved that would not lead to thermonuclear war. And that's been the state of affairs since the 1970s.
Well, Cheney tried to do it through NATO with the Russians in 2008. The Russians just rolled mobile nukes in and said and the head of their Joint Chiefs went on TV and said, we're preparing to launch nukes on your forces. And NATO turned back. I mean, what's wrong with NATO?
What's wrong with everybody? But the point is the cowardice. And I mean, Reagan twice put up the SDI as a solution. The British stopped it. The United States was considering it. But the British intervened and said, as your big ally, we say no. And that's why Reagan was turned down. Then you got a couple of British agents on Andropov and Gorbachev, who were the key figures in Russia and the Soviet Union then, and they were the responsible. Gorbachev is still around. He's still a damn nuisance in the world, and a pesky one. He's a British agent. He always was.
Incredible. Look, Mr. LaRouche, you've studied these people a long time. Is it megalomania, hubris, or do they really think they're going to win? Why are they so naked in what they do? Get into SDI, where we're going, all of this.
Well, look at the history of the United States. And it actually started in 1620, when some people from England and from probably the Netherlands as well came over to Massachusetts, so from all over Europe at first. And then later we drew from Asia as well in the later part of the period, going into the 20th century. We created in the United States the greatest movement for freedom that mankind has ever known, for the greatest duration, against what was still going on in Europe. It wasn't that the Europeans lacked a culture, European culture, but they lacked an effective culture because their system of government was dominated by the British Empire ever since 1763. The British Empire has dominated Europe with a few brief exceptions through the entire period. They control Africa totally. They controlled and committed mass genocide in India to consolidate their power there. They ran the drug war against China. They organized World War I, but they started already with the assassination of the president of France at that time. So this operation, this empire, this imperial system, which controls Africa as a slave state entirely still today, which controls Europe. For example, today in Europe, in Western and Central Europe, no sovereign nation state exists in Western Europe. They all lost their authority to the Euro system, which has no government. The government is the British government, which runs the Euro system.
And then acts like it's being abused by the Euro, but if you look, helped set up the Treaty of Rome in 57 on record.
They run everything. And the point is, it's still us, we, because we do represent, and from generation to generation, we die, in time. Everyone dies. But we aren't dead, because we are committed to a principle which lives on after we die. And those of us in the United States who still believe and stand by that principle which we embedded and expressed in our Constitution still exists. The problem is other people become confused, or they're doubtful of their powers. They're doubtful of their ability to intervene. When we make a decision, like as I propose we must make in the United States now, throw this bum out, I guarantee you will get a surge of response from our American people in a very large number, who will look at this as a sign of relief.
Exactly. It would be seen as a major signal, kind of like the cavalry coming. Stay right there. Lyndon LaRouche, final segment with him, get into other economic topics with him, and talk about these gathering mega storm clouds and a lot more. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I really wish this stuff wasn't true or real. I mean, I can't think about anything but the financial situation, the dollar devaluation, the depression, all the numbers coming out, a design depression, a bunch of control freaks waging war against our society, command destruction. It's incredible. And Lyndon LaRouche was talking about the American system versus this imperial, crony, centralized, neo-feudal system. And the whole eugenics situation, this anti-human movement. And there's no doubt they're barreling towards mega banks owning Europe and all their sovereignty transferred to it. And they call it a United States of Europe as a sick joke, as if a financial tyranny is the United States model. It's like calling the Patriot Act patriotic. Lyndon LaRouche, I wanted to ask you about the bill that was passed last night that says the government, the military, can operate in America and arrest citizens and hold them without trial for no reason. And I played clips earlier of Lindsey Graham, the sponsor of it, admitting that. And then Obama plays this cheeky game of saying, well, I'm not going to sign it. That's because last year he said, I can hold citizens and use the army. I don't need a law. He's saying I have the executive. So a lot of just amazing things happening. Now they've got a new bill to allow torture. That article's up at Infowars.com. Headline, Senate considers bill authorizing more torture. And the news is just running around acting like it's a great thing. This is so incredible. What if they have their way? You've talked about solutions and different systems. If they continue, if this group continues, and their drive for absolute domination over everything, no room for the nouveau riche, no room for intellectuals, no room for any science. They want a post-industrial world, a neo-feudal model, as you've said, the British eugenics model. What is going to happen to our country? What are we going to see in the short and then mid and then long term?
If we don't act now, we're going to find we're in a thermonuclear war. It's going to happen. If we don't act now to get this president out of office. If you don't pull this president out of office, you're going to have a thermonuclear war. Now, if we don't have him out of office, don't worry about anything. You're all going to be dead anyway. The British policy, and they said it, the British royal family, the extended family, the whole blue-blooded crowd, have said repeatedly they are now committed to the immediate objective of reducing the world's population from 7 billion people to 1 or less. That is the policy of the British monarchy. The British monarchy controls all of Europe, from the Atlantic into Central Europe, directly. They control the Euro system, totally. They control the forces that are being, including our stupid forces themselves, who are working under Obama's direction, under British direction, for a war in the Middle East. And it will be a thermonuclear war, because it will not be limited to Iran. It will not be limited to Syria. It will go to the entirety of Asia. That's what's at stake. Look at the amount of force. Look at the thermonuclear and related capability of the U.S. and augmented forces from Europe and so forth, which are deployed in the Gulf of Iran and in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. That force is there to fight a war. That war is not limited to Syria and to Iran. That is war once it starts, as the Russian deployment shows you. That war, when it starts, will be a thermonuclear war, as the president of Russia, in certain terms, have warned the world in the past 2 days. So the stage is set. The question is, who's going to come on stage? Is the American freedom going to come on stage and throw Obama out? Because if he don't throw Obama out, now when we have the charges for doing so, then we are condemned to this war. So we find the guts to win or we lose. And, it's not a question of what people think. A decision, when you have to make a command decision as a leader of a nation, or like the American Republic, there are times that comes that you have to make a decision on behalf of the people. Do you want what is happening to our people now? Do you think the majority of the people in this country wants what's happening to them now? Of course they don't. But they don't think they have the authority or the backing for someone to clean the mess up. And we have, in our terms of responsible people, in the Senate, in the houses of Congress, in parties in part, they all, in a sense, more or less will agree on some things. But they hesitate to take on throwing out a president who should be thrown out. If somebody has the guts and the qualifications to throw the bum out of office, I guarantee you will have a complete change in the policy of the American people in practice. And we can win this thing. But we don't have much time.
I agree with you. We don't have much time. And everyone I talk to, not just geopolitically, not just intellectually, in everybody's gut, people are really concerned. And, I go back to MF Global. I mean, they've never taken $3 billion of people's private accounts and just said, we're not even going to investigate, we're keeping the money. And now they're doing that. I mean, there may have been a method to the madness before, but when you talk about an inbred power structure, who a lot of them are just educated idiots, the sky's the limit. I mean, this is like Caligula or Nero. Understanding history, Lyndon LaRouche, and knowing what the breaks are right now, what do you see happening? I mean, you said with your intelligence and Pentagon connections, high-level groups are telling them no, no, no. But is that enough to stop them? Is that a good sign? What are folks there in Virginia and D.C. At the highest levels you talk to? What are they telling you? What are the Europeans you talk to telling you? How does Israel fit into all this?
Oh, Israel's a puppet. That's not really an issue. The issue here is this: what's the United States going to do, and what are other countries going to do? I can guarantee you, if we throw Obama out of office, we're going to have cooperation, full cooperation, from Russia, from China, probably from India, and from other countries. We're going to find that the world is going to have a kind of unity at the moment before Franklin Roosevelt died, when we virtually had won World War II. People are now at a point of anxiety that if somebody puts the solution before a hungry man on a plate, and the hungry man is seeing his children starving, and somebody's going to come with a solution, they're not going to have to be very fussy about finding out why they're doing what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're trying to get their country back. And we have most of the people in the United States want their country back. If a few of us in responsible positions of leadership act within the provinces of our Constitution to take an action to throw this president out of office, even if the initiative is made by a relatively few people, if it's made and made under the proper law, you'll find a rejoicing in the streets throughout much of the United States. And you'll be hiding Obama someplace where nobody can get at him because you're not going to have him killed.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
That'll change everything. But sometimes it takes, leadership does mean something. There's bad leadership, but there are times when the world cries for someone to act on behalf of justice.
And you're just pointing out that even though it's symbolic and he's a puppet of very wicked people, the fact that their puppet falls and they don't go through the regular cycle of a new Republican puppet, that would be seen as a major point to crystallize some real ideas of sanity being brought in. But what about the same forces trying to bring in just another new puppet? I mean, look at Newt Gingrich. Look at all these people.
I know, but let's take a look at D-Day. Look at the streets in New York City on D-Day, when we'd won the war. And if unfortunately we got Truman in instead of Roosevelt later. If Roosevelt had continued as president, we'd never have any of these problems. Sometimes our chief executive, or the circles which are our chief executive collectively, of our Constitution, when the people in our country do know something about our Constitution, they have some sense of it. But they may not know all the details, but they do know right from wrong in that sense. What's needed now is leadership in the United States, which will remove this president from office immediately. That will put into play immediately in the Congress, especially in the Senate, and some of the key people in the House of Representatives, will put them into motion immediately to change a great number of things suddenly. That doesn't mean everything is going to be solved, but it means we're going in a completely different direction, and we're going away from thermonuclear war. And that is what we have to do now. There are no preconditions required for doing that.
Lyndon LaRouche, give us some of the websites. There's LaRouchePAC.com. There's also LaRouche Pub, correct?
Yeah, LaRouche Pub is a publication of our organization.
I know you've got a lot of websites. I wanted to, we're out of time, and I don't want to twist your arm into any more time, but if we can, I want to go to break and do just 5 more minutes on the other side, because I want to ask you from your deep, deep study, and I read, the intelligence briefing and the rest of it, just invaluable information. But I want to understand the deep mindset of the oligarchy and what they think they're going to get out of this, because obviously it's leading them like Hitler into Russia or others on ill-fated journeys, and they're not going to make it out of this. They may succeed in wrecking everything, but there's got to be a point when this ends. Lyndon LaRouche, just give us 5 more minutes on the other side, and then we'll... And his analysis is spot on. You cannot deny we're at this point. Because the world is imploding, these globalists always start wars. And it is the British Empire model we face. So in closing, so that we know the enemy, not the English or British people or the UK, but that parasitic system there that through all of Europe's wars developed the most cunning, manipulative system ever seen. Who are they? What are they? What do they stand for? How do they see a way out in this?
Well, we don't know some of the history, but we do know that way back in the Mediterranean vicinity, there was a development of what we called oligarchical systems, in which a few people, a small part of the population, were called gods. They were treated as gods. And the ordinary people were treated as cattle. Now, that system of gods and cattle has continued in European civilization in particular, from that time to the present day in Great Britain. The British Empire is nothing but a revival of, again, for the 4th time, of a Roman Empire, which was started in Rome, which has featured such creatures as the Emperor Nero, and our current President of the United States has a personality identical psychologically or pathologically to the Emperor Nero. But we in the United States succeeded in establishing a system which was anti-oligarchical, in which the right of the individual citizen, as a citizen, was that of a human being, which had a right not only to live, but a right to pass on the meaning of their life to coming generations. And this was our special achievement in the United States by the people who left England, left Belgium, and so forth, left Europe, and came to this territory to build up this United States. Now, we were weak relative to the British Empire, because the British Empire does control the world. All of Africa is controlled by the British Empire. There's no exception to that. Most of the world is controlled by the British Empire. There's no exception to that. You have people within the system who are part of the imperial territory who will resist inside the territory, but they won't break it. We in the United States, with all our failures, our failed presidents, our goofing up the issue and so forth, we have remained in the tradition of what the American system is, which was actually founded in Europe by other people, but was achieved in what became the United States. And therefore, we have a special responsibility, and we are also respected. For example, in Asia, we tend to get respect because we're opponents of this kind of oligarchical system.
We've always been the great engine of at least the lofty ideals. Didn't mean we ever properly lived up to it. And to see America now used as an engine of corruption, and to see other countries use us as an excuse to engage in tyranny, that's got to please the finance oligarchs.
Yeah, but the point is, what does it hurt? It hurts every parent who has children. Because the secret of the United States does not lie in those of us who are living or who have lived. The secret of our United States lies in the heritage of creativity and related benefits, which we pass on to future. We may die, but we live in what we contribute to the future. That's the difference of our system and the typical British or oligarchical system.
That's right. Their birthright is only to the oligarchy. This is a birthright of free humanity, goodwill, peace, true liberty, true human revolution against tyranny. And as the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, it all talks about the posterity, the living thing, and it is a living thing.
Yeah, well, we see we're living in a galaxy, not just a solar system. We're living inside a galaxy. This galaxy, for some of us who study these things, has a history. It has a history in terms of the forms of life over the last 500 million years, which we know something about. And in this, we find the emergence of species, from single-celled species on the way up. We finally get into the antecedents of mankind, with the passage of the dinosaurs and people like that, and things like that. And we become a conscious factor. Animals don't have a conscious factor in shaping what the destiny of this animal species will be. Human beings do. And what is immortal in us is our power of the imagination, the creative imagination, to develop the ideas of what mankind shall be and how it shall function.
True self-determination, truly taking control of our development. We'll have to have you back on this subject alone. Lyndon LaRouche, incredible information. Thank you for your time.